Have you ever dealt with someone who tries to intimidate you in the most absurd way possible? I was just minding my own business when, boom, two so-called HOA cops showed up at my doorstep, flashing fake badges and acting like they had real authority. But there was just one problem. Karen had no idea I was with the US Secret Service. And the moment I exposed their little act, things went downhill fast. It all started with a letter. One single sheet of paper that looked like it had been designed in Microsoft Word and printed at a public library. To the homeowner at 1836 Willowbend Lane, you are in violation of multiple community codes. Immediate action is required. Failure to comply may result in enforcement measures. Signed at the bottom, Karen Whitlow, HOA president, stamped with something that looked suspiciously like a clip art logo. Now, here's the thing. There is no HOA on Willowbend Lane. That was one of the reasons I bought this property to begin with. No politics, no control freaks. Just a quiet house, a big yard, and the freedom to be left alone, so I threw it in the trash. But that was just her first move. The next day, there was another letter, then a third. By the end of the week, I had 6 pieces of paper shoved into my mailbox, all of them threatening action. Fines, violations, warnings, claims that my mailbox was non-compliant, that my paint color was too aggressive, and that I was operating a surveillance-grade security system without HOA approval. The part about surveillance, that one made me smile. Because what Karen didn't know was that I wasn't just some homeowner with a Ring doorbell and a motion sensor. I was on assignment leave from the US Secret Service, and if there's one thing I know how to do, it's identify a threat. Karen first appeared in person the following Saturday. I was out front pressure washing the walkway when I heard the unmistakable clip of high heels on concrete. I turned around and saw her standing at the edge of my property, blazer pressed, sunglasses oversized, and a manila folder tucked under her arm like a prosecutor. "Excuse me," she called out, waving the folder like it was a warrant. I let go of the pressure washer handle and walked toward her, drying my hands on a towel. "You must be Karen, and you must be the homeowner who thinks the rules don't apply." She handed me the folder like she was issuing me a citation. Inside were 5 copies of the same printed document, all with increasingly aggressive wording. She'd even highlighted certain lines in yellow. "This is your final warning," she said. "You've ignored multiple notices. Your property is not up to community standards." "What community?" I asked. "Oak Ridge HOA," she said sharply. "This isn't Oak Ridge," I said calmly. "This is Willowbend Lane, different subdivision, different zoning. There is no HOA here." She blinked just once, then quickly recovered. That may have been true in the past, but Oak Ridge expanded its jurisdiction last year. That includes your property. You're now under HOA authority. Now, I've been trained to keep a straight face in some of the most high-pressure situations imaginable, but I almost laughed out loud. "Karen," I said, "if you're trying to fake authority, you might want to try somewhere people don't read legal documents for a living." Her smile twitched just a little, then she stepped closer. "You think you're smart," she said, low and slow, "but I've dealt with people like you. Bullies who think they're above the rules. We'll see how smart you are when you're standing in front of a community tribunal." "You mean your porch?" I asked, "because that's the only courtroom you've got." She didn't respond, just turned on her heel and walked away. And that should have been the end of it, but it wasn't. On Monday, I found a notice taped to my front door. Mandatory HOA inspection, Tuesday 10 a.m. I took it down and set up a motion camera facing the yard. Tuesday morning, right on time, Karen showed up with a man I'd never seen before. He wore a cheap navy blue uniform with the word enforcement printed on the back in fading white letters. He had a badge clipped to his belt and sunglasses on, even though it was overcast. They paced along the edge of my property like they were doing a sweep, but they never rang the bell, never knocked, just pointed, whispered, took photos. My camera caught all of it. And when they left, they stuck another notice in the mailbox. Failure to cooperate with inspection will result in forced compliance. That's when I stopped smiling. I decided to pay a visit, not to Karen, to the county records office. I spent the next 3 hours pulling zoning maps, incorporation records, and homeowner agreements dating back 20 years. And surprise, Karen's HOA didn't exist, at least not legally. There was no record of her being a recognized president, no documentation of an expansion, no bylaws on file. not even a tax ID number. What there was, however, was a complaint file, one that had already been started by another homeowner on the next street over. Turns out, Karen had been trying this same move across the block, handing out citations, collecting fines, and threatening legal action under the name of an HOA that only existed in her printer. But the plot thickened. Because when I searched for the name of the officer who showed up with her, nothing came up. No business license, no security license, no gun permit, just a string of complaints on a local watchdog forum about a man fitting his description, impersonating law enforcement in suburban areas. One entry even described him flashing a fake badge to stop a jogger and accused them of violating community movement codes. Who even says that? Fake HOA, fake cop, real threats. So I decided to do what I do best, build the case. That night I set up a full perimeter of hidden cams. Not Ring, not consumer grade, we're talking real gear. The kind we use on stakeouts, motion detection, sound activation, auto upload to cloud. And I waited, because I knew they'd come back, and they did. Karen returned the next morning with the fake officer, this time trying the back fence. They were poking around, measuring the grass, and pretending to take photos of my AC unit. Then I saw it. The fake officer was carrying small black holster, low on the right hip. That wasn't just intimidation anymore. That was a weapon on my property, unauthorized. And that's when I realized they weren't just bluffing anymore. They were escalating. But what Karen didn't know, she just crossed the line. Because you can threaten me with fake fines, but the second you send an armed man onto my property, you're messing with a federal agent. After catching Karen's fake HOA officer snooping around with a gun on his hip, I knew this wasn't a petty power play anymore. It was turning into a serious threat. I reviewed the footage 3 times. He never once announced himself, never knocked. He and Karen walked along my fence like they owned it, muttering back and forth, pointing at things, and then, at one point, he placed his hand right on the grip of his weapon. No trigger discipline, no holster retention, just resting his palm there like he was waiting for an excuse. That's all I needed. I made 2 calls that night. One to the county sheriff's department and one to a friend in federal law enforcement, a guy I'd worked cases with before, someone who didn't ask questions when I said, "I've got someone impersonating law enforcement in a residential neighborhood, armed, backed by a fraud HOA president." His answer was simple: send the footage. Now, I did, and by morning the wheels were turning. But while we were gathering real legal heat, Karen was out in the street still playing her game. That afternoon she held a community walkthrough. At least that's what the flyer said. She walked the neighborhood with a clipboard in one hand and her fake cop shadowing her 2 steps behind. They handed out printed notices like they were campaign flyers, claiming some of the most ridiculous violations I'd ever seen. Trash bins too close to curb, excessive weed presence, patio, furniture color non-compliant. One guy got fined for having an American flag hanging at an angle inconsistent with community standards. Seriously. But the problem wasn't just the notices. It was how the fake officer delivered them. He'd glare, puff out his chest, tap his badge like it meant something. One neighbor later told me he stood right on their porch and said, "You don't want to find out what happens when you ignore enforcement." That wasn't policy. That was a threat. The next escalation came fast. 2 days later, I came home from the gym to find my front gate padlocked, literally chained shut with a bright red sticker slapped on it, "Property closed. Pending enforcement review. Do not remove." I stood there for a full minute. Then I cut the lock off with bolt cutters, walked inside, and printed out my own sign. "Any attempt to enter this property without a warrant will result in immediate legal action. This is not an HOA property. You have been warned." I laminated it, posted it on the gate, and attached a copy of my deed and the county map showing my home was never part of Karen's fake jurisdiction. And then I turned on the cameras. Because now, it wasn't about her dumb rules. Now it was me vs. her. The next morning, I woke up to a crowd in front of my house. Not a protest, just Karen, the fake officer, and 3 of her followers, all standing just outside my fence, looking at my sign like it was nuclear launch codes. She had a bullhorn this time. "This property is in clear violation of multiple codes. We are giving you one final opportunity to comply before enforcement measures are escalated." I stepped out onto the porch, calm as ever. holding a cup of coffee in one hand and my phone in the other. "Karen," I said, "you're standing on the sidewalk threatening a federal officer on record. I'd advise you to step away and go home." She blinked. "What did you just say?" I said, "I'm with the U.S. Secret Service. And I've got enough footage, documents, and testimony to bury your entire little operation." That wiped the smugness right off her face, but the fake cop stepped forward instead, putting his hand on his belt. "Sir, I'm going to have to ask you to stand down. You're interfering with an HOA enforcement action." That's when I said the words that sealed it. "You're carrying a firearm. You have no legal license, and I've already sent your photo and record to federal authorities. If you take one more step, the next person you see will be wearing a real badge." He froze. Karen looked between us, realizing she had two choices: retreat or escalate, and like a true Karen, she picked the wrong one. That night, she sent out a newsletter, printed, folded, stuffed into every mailbox in the neighborhood. Front page headline: "Local resident threatens security personnel, claims federal immunity." She even doctored a screenshot of one of my signs to make it look like I was running some kind of anti-community militia. She accused me of creating an unsafe environment, radicalizing neighbors, and attempting to dismantle the safety infrastructure of Oak Ridge Estates. It would have been laughable if people weren't actually starting to believe it. I got 5 nasty messages taped to my door that week. One called me a traitor. Another accused me of planning violence. The third one was just a sketch of my house on fire. That's when my wife told me it was time. We set the trap. But what was the plan? Well, before we dive in, if you're enjoying this story and love real-life HOA drama, don't forget to hit that subscribe button. Every new subscriber keeps me motivated to dig deeper, uncover more wild stories, and bring you even crazier content. Your support means everything. It's what keeps this channel going strong. And trust me, there's plenty more chaos coming your way. Now, back to the plan to get rid of Karen for good. I coordinated with my contact in D.C., who escalated the case to the Joint Task Force on Impersonation and Fraud. They assigned an investigator and connected me with the county prosecutor's office. And that's when we laid it out. The forged documents, the fake HOA registration, the gun with no license, the intimidation, the trespassing, the impersonation, and the fact that Karen's fake officer had a record out of state, including an old restraining order for threatening a woman during a similar enforcement. We had enough, but we needed one final piece: intent, so I baited her. I sent an email from an alternate account, posing as a concerned neighbor. Subject line: "Concerned about 1836 Willow Bend." Inside the message I wrote, "He says he's a federal agent, but I'm scared. He's confrontational. I think he's armed. You said you had a way to handle people like this. Can you help?" She replied in less than 2 hours. "Already handled. Enforcement will be on site Tuesday. Don't worry, he'll be dealt with." That was it. That was all we needed: premeditated harassment, knowing impersonation, intent to escalate. The plan was set. Tuesday morning, I sat on my porch, calm, relaxed, drinking coffee. Karen arrived first. Alone this time. No clipboard, no flyer, just that same smug face and her favorite lie. Then came the fake cops, same blue windbreaker, same badge, same cheap holster. They walked right up to the gate, and then everything happened at once. 3 unmarked SUVs pulled up from both sides of the street. Doors flew open, badges came out, guns stayed holstered, but hands were on them. U.S. Secret Service. Step away from the property. Karen turned as white as her blazer. The fake cop didn't even argue, just put his hands up and stared at the ground. The moment those unmarked SUVs pulled up, the whole neighborhood hit pause. Neighbors peeked from behind curtains. A few stepped out onto their porches. Phones started recording. Karen froze like a deer in headlights. The fake cop, Marcus, as we'd soon confirm, kept his hands high in the air. The only thing moving was his jaw clenching tighter with each second. 2 agents stepped forward, identifying themselves clearly and calmly. "Ma'am, sir, you are not authorized to perform any enforcement action. You are both being detained for questioning." Marcus didn't say a word. He just dropped his fake badge on the ground like it had suddenly caught fire. Karen, on the other hand, started talking. "Fast. This is a mistake. I'm the HOA president. This is a legal inspection. This man has been threatening me. He's dangerous." She pointed right at me. One of the agents turned to me and asked, "You good?" Perfectly fine, I said, setting my coffee down. You've got everything you need. Karen's face twisted like she'd swallowed a lemon. He's not even part of this community, she snapped. He's a federal imposter. He forged those signs. I've been protecting these people. The agents ignored her and placed Marcus in handcuffs first. Karen started backing up. You can't do this. I didn't know. I didn't know he wasn't real law enforcement. That's when one of the agents held up his phone and read her exact email reply from the trap account, already handled. Enforcement will be on site Tuesday. Don't worry, he'll be dealt with. She stopped mid-step. Silence. For the first time in all this, Karen had nothing to say. The takedown hit the neighborhood like lightning. I'm not exaggerating when I say people were out on their lawns within minutes, whispering, recording, watching the two of them get loaded into separate vehicles. Brian, my neighbor across the street, walked over shaking his head in disbelief. I knew she was shady, but I didn't know it was this deep. Fake cop, fake HOA, real charges, I said, he whistled. Damn, so it's true you're really Secret Service, I nodded. Off duty. Doesn't mean I tolerate threats. You're a legend now, he said, grinning. By noon, the HOA takedown was trending on the neighborhood Facebook group. Photos, clips, screenshots of Karen's fake documents. One neighbor posted a video from their doorbell cam, Karen giving Marcus cash while whispering instructions. Another shared an audio clip from their porch where Marcus threatened to issue a citizen citation for leaving a porch light on after 10 p.m. The comments were brutal. People weren't just angry, they were embarrassed. Karen had fooled almost everyone. That evening, the sheriff's office issued a statement confirming a woman falsely claiming to be an HOA president and an armed man impersonating a law enforcement officer were both detained after multiple reports and a federal investigation into unauthorized enforcement activity. They didn't release names yet, but they didn't have to. Everyone already knew. The fallout started immediately. I received nearly a dozen thank you notes that night. Actual paper notes, some handwritten. People who had stayed silent for years were suddenly speaking up. One woman said Karen fined her $250 for putting a decorative pumpkin on her porch in September. A single dad shared how Marcus knocked on his door at 9 p.m. one night demanding access to his backyard to check fence compliance. Even Mrs. Danner, the retired teacher at the end of the block, chimed in. Said Karen once threatened to report her to adult services because she left her garbage can out overnight. No one ever pushed back before, because no one thought they had the power to. But now they knew Karen was officially charged with conspiracy to commit impersonation of a public official, harassment, forgery, fraudulent collection of funds under false pretenses. Marcus faced more serious charges. Impersonating law enforcement, unlawful possession of a firearm, threatening a federal agent, and that last one. That was personal. Karen tried to spin it, of course. She hired a lawyer, released a statement claiming she was misled by someone she trusted and that she was just doing what she thought was best for community safety. But the email said otherwise. So did the video and the testimonies. And the $14,000 in cash she had collected from neighbors over 3 years in unrecorded fines. The county launched a full investigation into her HOA, even though it never existed in any legal capacity. Every fake notice, every false claim, every dollar collected, they froze her accounts. Neighbors filed lawsuits, and Karen, she disappeared. Moved out in the middle of the night before the court hearings even started. Rumor was she went to live with her sister 2 towns over. Changed her phone number, deleted her social media, but it didn't matter. Her empire was done. In the weeks that followed, I helped Brian and a few others organize a real community meeting. No agenda, no leadership titles, just people sitting in lawn chairs in the cul-de-sac, talking about how to make sure something like this never happened again. We set up a voluntary neighborhood watch, printed a simple code of courtesy, not enforcement, and people actually seemed relieved. Not because we had new rules, but because the fear was gone. I stayed quiet about the Secret Service thing, didn't wear it like a badge. I wasn't trying to be the new sheriff on the block. I just wanted peace, and we finally had it. One day, about a month later, I got a small envelope in the mail. No return address. Inside was a single note typed, no signature. I wasn't trying to hurt anyone. I just wanted order, but I went too far. I know that now. There was no doubt it came from Karen. I stared at it for a second, then tossed it in the shredder. Because remorse means nothing when it shows up too late. I've served in foreign embassies, escorted dignitaries through angry mobs, stood inches away from real danger more times than I can count. But none of that ever prepared me for a woman in a blazer with a clipboard and a god complex. You'd think a fake HOA couldn't get serious, but throw in a fake cop, a gun, and unchecked power, and you've got the makings of a domestic threat, not just to me, but to everyone around her. And in the end, she picked the wrong house, because when the HOA brought fake enforcement, they forgot to check who lived inside. After the dust settled and Karen skipped town, people started asking questions. How did this happen? How did one woman, with no legal power, no title, and no authorization, take over a peaceful neighborhood and run it like her personal kingdom? So I did what I was trained to do. I followed the trail, because something about all of this still didn't sit right. I went back through every fake violation notice, every fine letter, every community bulletin Karen had passed out. Most had been signed Karen Whitlow, President, Oak Ridge HOA. But there was no Oak Ridge HOA. Not anymore. A zoning map from the county office confirmed it. Oak Ridge was dissolved nearly a decade ago. The area had been absorbed into a larger municipal plan, eliminating the original HOA and transferring authority to the city. So why did Karen still have files labeled HOA expansion plan and resident compliance tracking? Because she had never stopped acting like she was in charge. I met with the county's property administrator, who pulled up Karen's name in the system. That woman submitted more paperwork than the actual zoning board, she said, shaking her head. Turns out Karen had filed over 30 fake compliance reports using a made-up HOA name. She'd also submitted requests to have non-compliant homes marked for inspection, some of which led to real homeowners being flagged for code violations because of her paperwork, because she knew just enough legal terminology to confuse the system. She exploited the gray area between local authority and HOA power, and she'd done it on purpose. But that wasn't all. When we ran a financial trace on the payments neighbors had made, some by check, others in cash, we found they were being deposited into a business account called Oak Ridge Preservation Group, an LLC registered under Karen's name. And guess who was listed as her security subcontractor? Marcus, the same fake cop she paraded around the neighborhood. So not only was she impersonating an HOA, she had monetized it, turned it into a private racket, a money-making, fear-spreading scam. We gathered all the paperwork, the testimonies, the documents, and handed it to the county prosecutor. They reopened the investigation and filed additional charges against Karen in absentia, including operating a fraudulent business misappropriation of funds, obstruction of government process. And while they couldn't track her down yet, the case wasn't going anywhere. Eventually, she'd slip. Meanwhile, life on the block started to return to normal. People repainted their doors whatever color they wanted. The guy with the flag on his porch put up 2 more, just because he could. Someone put garden gnomes all over their lawn, a direct shot at the approved ornament rule Karen once pushed. And the woman who was fined for pumpkins, she turned her whole yard into a year-round Halloween display. Everyone was healing in their own way. Brian and I hosted a Saturday cookout as a kind of reset party. No speeches, no HOA meetings, just food, music, and normalcy. About 40 neighbors showed up, lawn chairs, kids running around, people smiling for the first time in what felt like years. Then Mrs. Danner pulled me aside. She was holding a thick envelope. "I thought you should have this," she said. "Karen left it on my porch years ago. I never opened it." Inside was a list of names. Homeowners Karen had labeled as problem residents. There were notes next to each one: yard too messy, worn twice, fence too tall, threatened citation, late on donation, add to surveillance list. Donation, that's when I realized Karen hadn't just been collecting fines. She'd been running mandatory donations disguised as community maintenance fees. And she used the threat of made-up violations to squeeze people who didn't pay. It was organized, methodical, manipulative. It was also criminal. I handed that list straight to the investigators. Within days, the DA added extortion to her charges. That brought the total to 7 felonies. And that was just from our street. We later found out Karen had pulled the same scam in a different subdivision 5 years earlier. She'd been forced out but not arrested. Why? Because no one pushed hard enough. Until now. By this point, the story had reached local news outlets. One headline read, "Woman impersonates HOA president for years, Secret Service agent exposes suburban scam they asked for interviews." I declined. I wasn't interested in the attention, but my wife. She printed the article and taped it to the inside of the kitchen cabinet like it was a badge of honor. "We didn't ask for this," she said, "but we damn sure finished it." She wasn't wrong. A month later, the county issued a public notice. Oak Ridge Preservation Group is hereby dissolved. All pending complaints and fines associated with this entity are null and void. Any further activity under this name will be considered fraudulent. It was the final nail in the coffin. We didn't have to prove Karen was a fraud anymore. The government did it for us, and the neighborhood. It changed, not because people became different, but because they remembered what it felt like to be in charge of their own lives again. No fake notices, no clipboard patrols, no intimidation from a plastic badge, just freedom. One evening, I sat on my porch watching the sunset when a man I hadn't seen before walked up the drive. He introduced himself as Greg. He just moved into the neighborhood. "I heard this used to be a pretty strict block," he said cautiously. "People told me to watch out for the HOA." "Not anymore," I said. "That story ended." He smiled, relaxing a little, glad to hear it. "I was worried I'd get fined for the color of my mailbox." "Nope, you're safe now." He looked at my wife, then back at me. "Who do I thank for that?" I thought for a second, then answered truthfully. "A woman who thought she ran everything, and the mistake she made by picking the wrong target. Karen didn't realize it, but she built her entire operation on fear. That's why it lasted so long, because no one wants a fight on their doorstep, because it's easier to pay the fine than argue. But once someone said no, the whole thing cracked. And once people saw what was behind the curtain, they tore it down themselves. I wasn't the hero in this story. I just had the training, but the real change, that came from regular folks who finally stood up and refused to let someone with a clipboard and a fake title tell them how to live. 2 months after Karen vanished, I got a call from the county prosecutor. "We've located her. She'd been living 3 towns over under a different name, staying with her sister." They served her a court summons the same day. And just like that, the reckoning she thought she escaped came crashing down. She didn't respond, didn't file a motion, didn't show up in court, so the DA escalated. A bench warrant was issued. Within 48 hours, she was picked up at a small-town grocery store buying frozen lasagna and plastic lawn flamingos. Almost poetic. The mugshot made the rounds online. Karen Whitlow, former HOA president, booked on 7 felony charges, including fraud, impersonation, harassment, and firearm-related conspiracy. Her lawyer made a public statement claiming she had acted in good faith and had only ever tried to maintain safety and order. But prosecutors weren't buying it, especially after 3 more homeowners came forward with written proof she'd threatened foreclosure over fake fines. She had crossed the line from nuisance to full-blown criminal, and now the system was catching up. I didn't go to the first hearing. Didn't need to, but I did read the transcripts. When the judge asked Karen how she justified collecting money under a non-existent HOA, she replied, "Because someone had to be in charge." That didn't land well. The judge made it clear, HOA or not, you don't make up laws. You don't impersonate authority, and you don't hire armed men to enforce fake rules, especially not in a country where the real ones wear a badge for a reason. The jury didn't take long. They found her guilty on all counts. She was sentenced to 6 years in prison, with parole eligibility after 3. The judge also ordered her to pay restitution to every resident she defrauded, over $42,000 total. But the money wasn't what mattered. It was the record. The public acknowledgement that she had manipulated, bullied, and threatened innocent people for years. And now, she'd be spending the next few behind real bars, not just handing out fake violations. As for Marcus, the fake cop, he pleaded out early. He took a deal for impersonation, illegal possession, and intimidation with a weapon, got 2 years. But the plea came with a clause: he had to testify. And in doing so, he revealed something none of us saw coming. Karen had tried this before, not just once, 3 times, different counties. Same playbook. She'd move into a neighborhood, print up fake HOA documents, collect fines, hire security, and push people until someone finally fought back. In one town, she'd even convinced the city to recognize her HOA as real, only for the fraud to be discovered after she fled with $11,000 in enforcement dues. She was a serial offender, but this was the first time she picked the wrong target, a federal agent with cameras, backup, and the law on his side. She thought she was dealing with just another arrogant homeowner. She didn't realize she was trying to intimidate someone trained to recognize threats, build a case, and dismantle systems of corruption from the inside. And once that train started rolling, there was no stopping it. Back on our street, things were better than ever. We held monthly barbecues, started a real volunteer committee, not to enforce rules but to support neighbors. No one wore badges. No one handed out fines. If someone needed help mowing their lawn, folks just showed up with tools. If someone's roof needed patching, we took donations and made it happen. It was community, not control. Exactly what it should have been all along. Brian eventually printed shirts with Willow Bend watchdogs on them. We all got a laugh out of it. I wore mine once, just to mess with a delivery guy. He asked, "Is this one of those strict HOA blocks?" I just smiled and said, "Not anymore." One day, a woman I didn't recognize knocked on my door. She looked nervous, holding a clipboard, not Karen style, just a bit unsure of herself. "Sorry to bother you," she said. "I just moved in down the street. People said you're the one to talk to about what really happened here." I invited her in, gave her the short version. She listened, wide-eyed, then asked, "Do you ever regret how far it went?" That made me pause, because the truth is I didn't, not once. Karen wasn't just a bossy neighbor, she was a threat, a manipulator. She didn't enforce rules, she invented them. And she didn't just want order, she wanted control. People like that don't stop unless someone makes them. I just happened to be the person with the right background at the wrong time. And when she sent a man with a gun to my house, when she let someone carry a weapon to intimidate my neighbors, that's the line. That's where the game ends. Now, the sign outside my front gate says, "This neighborhood belongs to its people, not its rules." Someone gave it to me as a gift. And every time I see it, I remember what it took to earn that peace. About 6 months later, I got another envelope in the mail. This one had a return address. Federal Detention Facility Visitor Outreach Program. Inside was a short, handwritten note from Karen. "You destroyed everything I built. Congratulations. I hope it was worth it." No apology, no remorse, just spite. I folded the letter, tossed it in the drawer, and smiled. Because it was worth it. Every second. This wasn't about revenge. It wasn't about flexing authority. It was about reminding people like Karen that you can't just invent power and expect people to obey. You can't fake a badge and expect people to bow. And you sure as hell don't point a gun at the wife of someone who's protected heads of state. She wanted to rule a neighborhood. Instead, she got ruled by the truth. And in the end, all it took was one mistake. She picked the wrong house.